Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to this call. My name is Sasha Panapa. This is my sign name, and I'm the Executive Director of Deaf Organization Funds, DOF. I just want to thank you guys for joining us for our first ever live call. And the purpose of this is just to share with the community some updates about the DOF and who we are, what we've been doing, and where we're going. So again, thank you. I'll go ahead and allow Avi to introduce herself and expand on that.
Hi, everybody. My name is Avi Hamowitz. I'm the Director of Development, focused on all of our fundraising efforts, our donor efforts as well. And today we have with us behind the scenes our dear Dan Mabashov. He is our project manager and he is running and coordinating absolutely everything behind the scenes today. Huge shout out to him, and he'll be saying hi to everybody in the chat.
And this is Sasha. We are still waiting for people to join, but while we're waiting, I thought it would be a great time to take this opportunity to put out a poll question. And this question will help us understand who's here in the audience today. And so the question is, what brings you here today? We actually have 4 options to answer. One is, I am involved in a nonprofit organization. 2, I'm a fan of DOF, or Deaf Organization Fund. 3, I'm a new person here and I'm just curious to learn more. Or the 4 is other. If you click on other, then just leave a comment in the chat of what your reason is. The poll will come up now.
You should see a pop-up window that has that question for everybody to answer. We'll give people a moment just to answer.
We'll see those results populate very shortly. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and share the poll results now. This is Sasha. Okay, so 52% of you guys are involved currently with a nonprofit organization. 26% of you guys are fans of the DOF. Thank you, thank you. 22% of you guys are new and curious and want to learn more about Deaf Organization Funds. So great, I really hope to be able to answer your questions throughout the presentation. Okay, so let us go ahead and dive in. Avi will go ahead and expand on Deaf Organization Funds.
This is Avi. So the Deaf Organizations Fund, we abbreviate by DOF. As of today, we are the only funder who is providing fully accessible grants and resources in the ASL English and Spanish languages on a national scale. We provide grants and resources regardless of the geographic location of the organization that is applying or their targeted service area. We serve all deaf organizations. The mission is for us to strengthen organizations that work with the deaf community. And our vision is to one day have a community where people can experience and access a wide array of services by thriving, well-resourced organizations that they can seek those services from. Now, when we're talking about deaf organizations, we tend to mean both deaf organizations, and sometimes you'll see us use the sign deaf-centered organizations. The meaning behind that and what our definition is of deaf-centered means organizations that are guided by and led by at least half of their leadership identifying as being a member of the deaf community. By saying the word leadership, we could mean a lot of different programs or roles. So it could be senior management, executive leadership. It could be the volunteer leaders, board, advisory committees or councils, any of those types of leadership capabilities. We look at those roles as being deaf individuals who are 50% or more. Also, the community that they serve needs to be prioritized for those who are deaf. We know that there are a lot of marginalized communities within the larger deaf community, and oftentimes we get questions about two things. People we ask us right away what types of organizations that we fund. We fund those that are based in the United States and have 501c3 status. It's important that any organization that is internationally based, that they do have a sponsor who is based in the US and has a 501c3 status. That's our current position with that. And also, we don't fund grants to businesses. We only fund grants to charitable organizations. So now we'll talk a bit more about who we are. Sasha.
Okay, I'll let you peruse the screen first and look at the people that are behind the Deaf Organization Fund, the staff, as well as the board that are listed here on the slide. Like Avi mentioned, there's the three of us, myself, Avi, and Dan. And the three of us do work virtually. We are located all over the United States, as well as our board and our grantees are all over the United States. The three of us have over 20 years of nonprofit experience. Avi and myself have both worked with leading a deaf nonprofit organization. And we understand the struggles, we understand the challenges, the roadblocks, and also the joys that come with leading a deaf nonprofit. And that experience has really shaped our experience here at DOF. The 5 board members are affiliated with the Communication Services for the Deaf, CSD, which is our parent organization. And Avi will get into the relationship between DOF and CSD a little bit later on. The 5 board members that we have are Marilyn Smith, board member, Echo Greenlee, board member, Christopher Sukup, who is the CSD CEO, Maria Wilson, CSD Chief Legal Officer, and we also have Thomas Means, who is the Chief Financial Officer at CSD. And all 5 of those make up CSD board. I'm sorry, the DOF board.
Now we can go ahead and dive a little deeper into the actual structure and the growth that we've experienced as an organization. This is kind of a history lesson for all of you who might be less familiar with us as an org. Sasha mentioned that our parent organization is Communication Services for the Deaf, or CSD. CSD is a national nonprofit organization that is dedicated to providing and improving the quality of life for deaf individuals in the United States, and has had a variety of programs and services that they have run over the course of the last 50 years with telecommunication, people who own their own business, entrepreneurship, all sorts of different areas, but sponsorship and support for deaf-run organizations was recognized as a huge gap. So the CSD board and the CEO decided to, in 2020, set up an endowment fund. That endowment was intended to support deaf nonprofit organizations. As you know, 2020 is also the year that the COVID pandemic hit. And so we really had to use that pilot emergency funding for COVID for us to help out the deaf organizations in the United States. We received a lot of applications for that emergency COVID funding. People said, we need this and we need more of this. So it really validated and justified the need for this. And in January 2021, this was officially set up as the CSD Deaf Organizations Fund. We also started our second round of COVID funding during that year, 2021, and also looked at not just COVID funding, because that was still an issue, of course, but there were a lot of other areas that needed funding as well. And so we opened our capacity building grants as well in 2021 and into 2022. And again, the response was phenomenal. We received a lot of applications and a lot of feedback as well that said the capacity building grants were wonderful. Those were focused on the infrastructure and operational needs, but people needed to see where we saw that trust in the organizations that they could determine their area of greatest need themselves. And so just in the fall of 2023, we opened up our scope even wider and started an unrestricted funds program so that we are demonstrating that we trust that those organizations know what they need the most more than us as a funder for them. Sasha will talk about that a bit more in depth in a minute. So we are recognizing that the deaf-owned, deaf-centric foundation or organizations are needing to have some more autonomy of how they're using their funds. Our mission hasn't changed at all of what we're doing. We are just having this be much more widely provided. We are the only standalone public charity that is sponsored by a parent organization like CSD. CSD operates our funds and our operational expenses at this time. So that means that donations that are received and donated to us can go to the grants, resources, and programs that are in that endowment if the donors choose to fund it. So that is a bit about our history. I want to challenge you all with a small little pop quiz. Your answers are confidential and anonymous, so don't be afraid of, getting an answer wrong. Go ahead and choose what you think. I'm going to go ahead and sign the question before we have the pop-up window. What percentage of grants worldwide are awarded to disability-centric organizations? 2% go to disability-related projects, 15%, or 25%. You'll see a pop-up now, and you can go ahead and choose which answer you think is correct.
So curious to see the results. So
Make sure you click to vote.
Want to see what they've chosen.
Okay, let's see how people have voted. I'm curious to see.
This is Sasha. I'm actually not seeing the results.
You're right, me either.
Just trying to figure out where those results are, if you don't mind holding just a moment.
Okay, it looks like 70% said 20%. 24% chose 15% are funded, and 4% of you chose 25%. Okay, now we're going to dive into the facts related to this on the next slide.
This is Sasha. Okay, the answer is 2%. So those 72% of you guys that voted 2%, you guys were correct. So I'll go ahead and explain what that 2% means. So the philanthropic industry is a billion and billion dollar industry. I mean, they have money. They have those dollar signs. And what their role is to provide funds and grants to organizations and communities. Now, within those billions of dollars industry, only 2% of that goes to disabilities. And then within that 2%, it's such a small portion that goes to deaf organizations. And many deaf organizations are feeling the pains of that. They are under-resourced, they are underfunded, which means, many of them are volunteer ran, or they just don't have enough funding to sustain their services. They're unable to have scalable solutions to address their community needs. It has been challenge after challenge after challenge. And those that are impacted the most are the deaf community, the deaf people within the deaf community, having the inability to even access the resources to access the service and programs, or even have the option to choose their resources and services to help their families, to help the communities. And that is such a significant disparity within the communities, from such a billion-dollar industry and what they're able to allocate to those deaf communities. And so the Deaf Organization Fund is here to be able to provide more of those resources and grants to those targeted deaf organizations, nonprofit organizations. So let's go ahead and meet who our grantees are, our past and current. Go ahead and take a look at the slide. These ones, as I said, our past and current grantees. We have a total of 24 organizations. In 2020, that grant that Avi had mentioned, that COVID grant, 2020, 2021, those 2 years, we focused on COVID-19, and then 2022, 23, we focused on capacity building grant, which meant we were really supporting the organizations within their infrastructures and their operating costs, whatever it takes to run the organization. And then just recently, we opened up that to unrestricted funds. And so what unrestricted funds means is that we're really trying to align DOF with trust-based philanthropy. And so what that means is our role as funders is in the back. The ones that are leading are the organizations. They're the experts. They know the communities, they know the needs, and they know what it takes to run the organization. So they can let us know the area of the greatest need. Unrestricted funds, and we will go ahead and fund that. And so you may notice that there are some of these circles here that have actual yellow stars around it. Those are our current grantees here in 2024 who will receive those unrestricted grants from the DOF. So in total, since 2020, we have funded 24 deaf organizations and programs, but now some of those have received subsequent multiple fundings from us. And so what that really means is we have actually funded a total of 28 grant funded projects. And the amount that we have given is 400,000 or almost 400,000. And since 2020, the numbers of applicants that we have received and what the asks for funds are have totaled 215 applicants. And the actual amount of the ask is almost $3.7 million. And let's process that for a minute. Let's just take a step back. So we have funded almost 400,000. And there's 3.7 million. Let's round up to about 4 million to just keep it a good round number. So 400,000 is what we have given out already, but 4 million is asked. Ooh, that is a long way from 400,000 to 4 million. But one day, with all of your support, with fundraising, growing the endowment fund, reaching out to those funding partners to really join us, we can one day scale up our grant making efforts. One, we can increase our grant size. Instead of having those small fund amounts, we can have larger amounts. And then we can also fund more organizations. 24, no, we want more. We want that 215. We want to be able to fund all of the applicants that come in. That is the goal. So if you want to know a little bit more about these organizations and what their projects are, that website at the bottom of the slide is where you can learn a little bit more about our individual grantees and their projects. Next, we will get a little bit further into the data that we have. I'll let you take a look at this graph just a little bit more before we get started. On the left-hand side of the bar graph, so we have asked the applicants since 2022 to please share with us their annual operating budgets. And so 2022, 23, and 24 applicants. In total, we're about 141 applicants. And from that 141 applicants, about 48% operate with less than 100,000 annually. Ooh. About 24%, about 25% operate with 100 to 500,000 annual cost. 7% operate with 500,000 to 1 million, and then 20% of that operate with 1 million or more. And this is proof that yes, deaf organizations are often underfunded and under-resourced. And what that means is they're struggling. They're struggling to pay rent. They might be struggling to meet payroll and pay their staff, hiring people, get training, board training, development, strategic planning, all of that. And that validates why we are here today. And so just to get more into the recent data from the 2024 applicants, the ones that came in last fall, we got about 70 applicants. And from that pool of 70, 24% submitted their applications or their proposals, all or part in ASL. And this is a record milestone for the Deaf Organizations Fund. We see annually the ASL applicants have increased and have keep increasing, but now we're up to 24%. This validates the need and the value of accessible grant making progress and the process. And so it's time to make the process more accessible. Also, 75% of our recent applicant pool operates at less than 500,000.
Sasha, you are just mentioning basically what the problem is essentially of what the Deaf Organizations Fund was set up to try to resolve. Over the past 4 years and 5 years of grant making, our navigating of this service and what solutions we have is kind of threefold. So of course, our primary and most important concern is making the grant making process and the grant application process from start to end fully accessible. So that means before an application is even submitted, when an organization is interested, we offer information in 3 languages, in ASL, English, and Spanish. So people can contact us with questions that they have about the grants. We can talk with them via email, or we can speak with them using Spanish or using American Sign Language. So make sure that they're prepared to write that grant. At the time of the grant award, they have the opportunity to meet with us to review their grant agreement, again in ASL, which for many, this is their first time ever being able to receive this information from a funder using that language, having direct communication access using American Sign Language, and what exactly it is that they're signing off to receive that money for. And that can help them when they're meeting with other funders to be able to know exactly what's happening there as well. Grant agreements have pretty standard language. And so by being able to reinforce their understanding of those grant agreements in ASL can reinforce their knowledge just across the board. Also post-award, we have some pretty basic mid and final surveys about their grant projects. That grant report is also accessible in those 3 languages I've mentioned. So again, from start to end, we are providing these accessible options for our grantees. Also, for the first time in the 2023 grant cycle, we provided transparency review metrics. So organizations that applied knew exactly it was that we would be evaluating their applications on, what those metrics would look like. And again, in all 3 languages. We also, for the first time ever, had an individual grant review committee of individuals who identify as members of the deaf community and also have extensive experience in deaf nonprofit organizations themselves, for them to be able to help evaluate our applications outside of the folks who work for DOF. The solutions that we're providing currently include one-on-one coaching support, and we also provide technical assistance for the deaf-centric organizations in general. As I've mentioned, for many of these organizations, this is their very first time being able to connect with a funder using ASL. This might also be their first time receiving a grant ever For many of those organizations, they are craving and would really benefit from these options. And that's why we provide them. We can do monthly support one-on-one throughout the year. It could be quarterly, or it could be as needed as they need. Again, it is completely organizational led, and it's just offered. We offer that coaching, that support, and that kind of mentoring. And many do take advantage of that. Sometimes they need help mapping out what their vision is and their impact for the grant proposal that they have. They might want to know how to best make that turn into a reality. They might want to know how to use their budget wisely. And so sometimes we can pass them off to a subject matter expert who can help them learn about how to spend down the funds that they receive. Many deaf-centric organizations reach out to us who are just curious about what our grants are that we offer, or also ask us for resources that they could find outside of DOF. We try our best to do that kind of technical assistance and refer them to what they need. Also, as a funder, we have the benefit and the privilege of kind of knowing more about what's happening in the philanthropy sector nationwide, where there's conferences, where there's summits, developmental opportunities, etc. And so we do share those opportunities with organizations and help facilitate that organization's ability to be able to attend some specific events or conferences. For example, some of our grant opportunities that come up, that we know that a grant or a grantee might benefit from, we make sure that we share that information with them, and we share it with the ones who are setting up grants and connecting them in those ways as well.
And this is Sasha. Avi, we've got a question in the chat. Looks like we have a question from Linda. Is the coaching and support only for grantees? That is a great question. At this time, yes, it is only for the grantees, but we are doing our best to support the general public, the deaf organizations, and connect them with resources, connect them with information if they're available. But the actual coaching, that monthly, quarterly, the grant projects, that is reserved for the grantees. But we do hope that later on, eventually, when we scale up and we have more of those resources, we can provide stuff additionally beyond just the grantees. I hope I did answer your question, Linda.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Linda, for the question.
Okay, it looks like we do have another similar question. Let me read that 1 second. Okay, so I just want to remind people, if you guys don't mind, if you want to type questions, I recommend you type that into the QA chat. That will actually help Avi and myself be able to just, flow this a little bit more. Or you can raise your hand using that icon, then we can turn on your camera and you can sign. But the one question that did come up in the chat was, how can deaf-owned small businesses that are struggling financially get access to small business grants? Do we have to have a 501c3 to take advantage of the deaf organizations fund service? Great question. So yes, right now DOF is only funding 501c3 charitable organizations. And that is where we are staying with. Now, if the organization does not have a 501c3, they must have a fiscal sponsor who themselves do have that 501c3. So we will only be funding those that do have that 501c3. Now, other funders out there have their own eligibility requirements. And so it is imperative that you just take a look at that and see if they have to be a nonprofit, is an LLC. And so we just need to make sure that we are matching those eligibility requirements.
Great. Are there any more questions? Oh, I do see some more questions in the Q&A section now, Sasha. So I'll go ahead and sign the first question. With 2% being offered to deaf or disabled organizations, what kind of language would you suggest our organizations who are struggling to get a seat at the table, what should we use to enlighten other organizations or other foundations that are not aware of this gap and why it would be vital to partner or fund our operations and resources. For context, we often get asked what orgs focus on people with disabilities. And my response is that all organizations should. That is a great question. Sasha, do you want to answer that or would you like me to?
I'm still thinking of an answer for that one. 2%.
Well, as Sasha is mulling that over, I'll just put out there that we are going to be diving into what DOF is looking for in the next 1 to 3 years and what we're looking to achieve. One of our goals is to be providing more data, more resources, and more justification using that data of why you should be receiving that kind of funding out in the mainstream. So that is one type of solution that we're going to be working on, but it is definitely not immediate to the questioner's question.
And this is Sasha. When I think about the verbiage that's using, so it's not so much the language that they're using, but it's the relationship that you have with the funder. If you have an in, if you're able to explain and help, that empathetic part, the challenges that the deaf organizations are having. There are a lot of hearing funders that just do not get it. They're not thinking about, the disabled pipeline and what the experience is of deaf organizations and the deaf communities. Many of them just don't get it. And so when you think about language, it's really about the rapport, maintaining those relationships. And sometimes it does require educating them and, letting them know that these are the challenges that are being faced by the deaf organizations.
The second question in that Q&A box, another person has said, I wonder if there's any deadline for grants. And for 501c3 only, what about deaf mentoring jobs as business owners? Like, for example, if you work with adults with disabilities. There's kind of two questions within that one question. I'll go ahead and answer the first part. The deadline for grants, typically, at least historically, in the last 4 years, we've offered grant opportunities every year in the fall, around the October timeframe. So you can kind of keep an eye out for that. It opens for a certain period of time, and it will be clear from that grant announcement when the grant application deadline will be. It's not always the same date year to year, but I will say it is typically in the fall. If you're subscribed to our email, you'll get that information. As far as deaf mentoring jobs for people who own a business, we only work again with those who are non-exempt organizations. So 501c3, we don't work with small businesses.
This is Sasha. So small business or small business, we do not fund individuals. The individuals need to be within a nonprofit themselves.
This is Avi. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move along. We have a video that we're going to share of one of our grantee organizations. This video will be about 2 minutes long. It does have captioning and it does have the voiceover. The person will be signing in ASL. This is Aracelia, and she is one of our co-empowerment. She's from Deaf Hope. And again, her Aracelia Salazar is her name. She's the executive director. Deaf Hope is based in Oakland, California. Their mission is to end violence in the deaf community through the empowerment, education, and provision of services. The video, she talks about a bit about Deaf Hope and their experience as a grantee organization in working with DOF.
Deaf Hope is committed to healing communities, ending violence through transformative community-based strategies. Deaf Organizations Funds is a critical partner in our work. With a shared language and cultural understanding, they are able to support deaf services in unique ways. They are also implementing innovative restorative approaches to philanthropy with potential to generate widespread change. This includes removing barriers to the application process, making it simple and accessible. They make grant reporting about connecting deep understanding of the work that they are funding without putting any burden on us. These strategies allow us to focus on the important work that they are funding rather than the work of the grant management. Deaf Organizations Fund is setting a new standard in philanthropic leadership, and we're very grateful for this new approach and change in traditional expectations in funding for organizations.
Oh, we really appreciate Aracelia's comments here because it really speaks to our vision of having non-traditional grant making make the process be led by the organization themselves instead of us as the funders. And it kind of puts that traditional model of philanthropy on its head, where you have the organization that is funding kind of telling the organization who's receiving the funds what they should do and how they should do it. Instead, this really puts us all on parity. And I think that's it's exciting to see that that is something that is being experienced. And she speaks to where we're trying to go as far as, you know, guiding things in the world of philanthropy to be more deaf-centric so that organizations feel heard, respected, and supported through their journey. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sasha, who's going to talk about where we're planning to go in our own evolution as an organization. Sasha.
As DOF grows, thrives, and scales up, we of course want to be able to provide more resources and more support to those deaf organizations. These are those 3 key priorities that we are hoping to address and implement within the next 1 to 3 years. First, obviously, the number 1.
Oh, hold on one second, Sasha. I'm seeing in the chat that there is some technical issues with being able to see our videos right now. Okay, seems like it's better now. Thank you all for letting us know so quickly.
Okay, can you comment if you guys can see us now?
Okay, great. Looks like you can. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for the feedback. This is Sasha. I'll go ahead and back up just a little bit. So as DOF grows, we of course want to be able to scale up our resources that we're offering to those deaf organizations. These are those 3 key priorities that we're hoping to implement in the next 1 to 3 years. Obviously, the first priority is to increase accessible funding opportunities. And that kind of means 2 different paths. So when we approach funders who themselves are committed to disability justice, that they want to support those organizations, our DOF funds we pool. And then we provide more grants, maybe bigger amounts, larger amounts, and then also a larger amount of organizations would receive them. The other accessible fund opportunity would be where we approach those funders and say, hey, your grant making process needs to be accessible. It needs to include ASL. It needs to be mindful of deaf organizations. And so that deaf organizations can pursue multiple funding opportunities. And so what that means is that DOF is not the only one, but we want deaf organizations to be able to pursue other grant funders as well. And so they can diversify their grant streams and then they can scale up their work as well. The last 2 key priorities, specialized database and networking and collaboration. Those two key priorities we identified through our application process. And so beyond the grant dollars, beyond the money, what other touch points are there? What other resources would be able to support you? And we got multiple responses, these two things. Specialized database, meaning I want one central location, one database where myself, a leader of my organization, can go and I can find accessible funding opportunities to support my organization. So just one centralized location. The second thing was that they wanted accessible deaf subject matter experts, SMEs. We need training, we need board development, we need strategic planning, we need grant writers, contractors. We need all this, but we don't know where to start. Or maybe we have a good experience, but we don't know if other people will have it as well. So we just need one central location where we can get that information. And that third thing that people are asking for is to have a deaf-centric data. And so what that means is that data is tied to our deaf communities, and that will help us with patterns and to be able to convince funders. When we say, tied to deaf-centric data, well, that could be deaf and mental health, what that looks like, deaf and language acquisition, deaf and workforce placement. Those types of informations help us when we are working with those funders trying to get those monies. That third thing, network and collaboration. There were a whole host of applications that asked for that space to have something to share best practices, share guidelines, different perspectives on things and solutions. Often our deaf leaders are running in silos. They are so segregated. And what that means is, I may be the only person, the executive, I'm the only deaf executive director in my tri-state service, and I may want assistance. I might need some support, but I don't know where to go for that. Yeah, sure, there's hearing organizations, there's hearing collaborators, sure, but do they have that full understanding, that empathetic compassion of those deaf organizations? And so I really do hope that within the next 1 to 3 years, we are able to implement those three key pillars. And Avi will dive into a little bit happens with DOF now and moving forward with our key priorities.
Thanks, Sasha. Okay, what's coming soon? This is what's on deck for us in the next 3 to 6 months. First, we are going to be hosting our second annual virtual run/walk. And that is a fundraising event that is called Dash for Deaf Organizations. That is going to be happening, or starting registration is going to open on March 22nd. It's just a fun way, and it's right around the corner, for the community to just raise awareness about the work that we're doing and run for a good cause. And of course, we're going to continue sponsoring our current cohort of the 2024 grantees. We're going to continue working on donor engagement as well. That means identifying and building relationships with donors and those who are passionate about the work that we do, figuring out what their interests are, what our interests are, where those align, and how they can support those interests. Also, board members. We are looking to grow, and we're wanting to pull in more board members by the beginning or early part of next year. So currently we're working on building and identifying some relationships with some specific folks that have those types of skill sets that are valued and what we need to have in our board. So if you know of anybody, please feel free to email us after this call and let us know who they might be. And of course, we have the unrestricted grant application for 2025. We're planning to have open, as I've mentioned previously, this fall. We also have hosted several meet and greet type of organization events for people to be able to come and meet with us in person in their community, to speak with, those who are supporters, those who are interested in supporting us as well, and also meet with the organizations to just have people have the opportunity to learn more about DOF, where we have the opportunity to learn more about what work they're doing in the community, what challenges that they're facing, and those kinds of things. We're planning on hosting our meet and greet this year on the West Coast, since we have not yet been to the West Coast. Feel free to nominate your West Coast state if you'd like to in the chat. Feel free to let us know where you'd like us to go out west.
A warm place, please.
Absolutely, that's what we want. And also in closing, we want to really turn the floor open and the rest of our time open to you. We want to hear your feedback. We want to know your thoughts, answer your questions. There are 2 ways you'll be able to do that with us. Again, hit that QA button, type your question there. You can also hit the raise hand button to come on video and sign your question to us in ASL. Don't be shy. We've got a few minutes open.
This is Sasha. We have received one question already. Is there a time limit an agency can apply for a grant? Can one agency apply in the next year for a different project or a program? Yes. Speaking of our current or past grantees, yes, they are able to apply. You know, when the application cycle reopens, I do let the grantees know that, hey, you know, the grant applications are now open. If you do meet the eligible criteria and if you're wanting to apply again, feel free to do so. So yes, you are able to do that. And we actually hope that one day that we will be able to fund organizations for multiple years at once and just sustain their work. You know, that is our dream, to one day be able to do that. Great question. Okay, any other questions?
This is Avi. There is another question in the Q&A box.
Okay, this is Sasha. How many grantees who are non-white received the grant? Gosh, that's a great question to ask. We have not asked our grantees to self-identify, meaning we have not asked the leaders to self-identify what communities they are from. However, we do prioritize grantees and organizations who themselves support and represent marginalized communities. So I am trying to think for 2024, the grantees that we just had, I want to say the majority of them are supporting communities who themselves are marginalized or themselves are members of those marginalized communities. And I would say that's the same thing for the 2023 cohort as well. And I'll post the link where you can just meet who our current and past grantees are, and you'll be able to peruse that for yourself. Are there any other questions? I see some of the comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you so much for joining us today. It really means a lot, especially because this is our very first impact call we've ever had. So thank you all for being a small part of history today. Just so you know, when we finish this call and you click leave or we end it, there's going to be a 3-question survey that will pop up in a new window. We would love to receive your feedback on how we can shape these impact calls going forward. As Sasha mentioned, we are hosting these regularly. That's what we're planning to do. This won't be the last one that we have. If you can't or you don't have time to fill out that survey today, that's okay. We will be sending out the survey again tomorrow via email, so you'll be able to give us feedback tomorrow.
This is Sasha again. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I do appreciate you taking your time out of the day to spend time with us.